First thing I do after I wash my hands is measure out their feed. Coco is getting 12 ounces of the dairy ration, and Katie is getting 6. That's a handful each of beef pulp. Plus a quarter cup of sunflower seeds. And I pull the jars out of the oven. These are the large collecting jars. And I put a cap with a white filter inside. On top of the jars. Hook the milk line, which is the blue line clear tubing, up to the jar. And I put the cap on the second collection jar. This is a strip cup. It's very important. It's one of the first steps is to strip the teat, a few squirts. And then I go get the goat. Usually Katie comes in first, but today Coco decided she wanted to go first, so I grabbed her feed. And I still put the hobbles on because they get kicky when they run out of food, and I don't want them to kick the inflations. This probably won't be necessary for very much longer, but they don't seem to mind it. It's just very important to remember to take them off before you release them, otherwise they try to hang themselves. Okay, next very important step is to clean off the teats with one of these wipes. And I just clean the teat because I don't want to drag anything down from the udder to the teat. Then I strip the teats. About 7, 8, or 9, 10 squirts of milk. That's to get the high bacteria milk out of the teat. And I bump her a couple of times just for good measure. Turn on the machine. Check the pressure. If everything's hooked up right and closed. Should be in the neighborhood of 10 to 12, which it is. I'm only doing these one at a time, because it's easier for me and I'm not in that big of a hurry with only 2 goats to milk. And with Coco it usually takes 30 to 45 seconds to empty one side of the udder, depending on how full she is. And once it slows down to a bare trickle, I gently massage the udder. usually get a few more ounces of milk that way. I do that until I'm not getting much milk out anymore. I don't go overboard with this, but I like to completely milk her out, especially now that no kids are. I go over to the other side and do the same thing. Again, when it slows down to the trickle, we'll massage the udder. Get the last of the milk out. Down to the last few drops. Pull it off. Shut off the suction, drain the last of the milk out of the tube. I usually give that about 10 or 15 seconds to get it all drained out, just to make sure she gets credit for all her milk. Hang it on the hook up above. And this is Fight Back. It's an antibacterial spray that I use instead of a wipe to clean off her teat at the end. It's cooling and probably makes her feel a little bit better. Release the hobbles if they're on. Good girl. Change the suction tubing over to the next jar for the next goat. She gave us a fair amount of milk this time. I'll go over here and weigh it. The jar weighs 2.5 pounds, so I have to subtract that. So she gave us 1.9 pounds of milk this time. So that's, when she's done, I have to make her wait until I get the milk transferred over. I have these jars with, oops, that's not going to work. Lids that are marked with the date and AM or PM. I transfer the milk from the milking jar to the mason jar. And I don't worry about getting every last drop of foam. It's mostly air. And then I take the full jar over to the chiller. Which right now just has jugs of ice in it. I usually put some crushed ice in first thing in the morning that keeps it cold all day. Plug it in, which starts the circulation pump. Make sure the jar lid is tight because I don't want water in there. Close it tightly. Basically the same process. Headlock, hobbles, clean the teats. This gives me a chance to do a careful inspection of the udder to make sure there's no redness or tenderness or lopsidedness, all of which could be an indication of mastitis. When I strip, 7 to 10 squirts. 7. Bump. She doesn't mind at all. Katie is usually not as full as Coco, so she only takes 20 to 30 seconds before slows down and I massage her. It's not that huge of a difference anymore, but she's still a little smaller. The udder to get the last few ounces out. Suction. Drain the rest of the milk out of the tube. Spray the antibacterial on the teats. Take off the hobbles. 1.4 pounds for Katie today, which is above average for her. Total for today was 3 pounds for Katie. Her kid's just weaned, so I'm getting all the milk now. It's exactly the same. Put it in the chiller. Make sure the chiller is closed tight so it stays cold. And then I bring this thing here back to the barn before I start the cleanup. Come on, Katie. The next part is cleanup, which is reasonably easy. I start out by giving my hands one more good wash while the water gets hot. And for this first step, I want lukewarm or body temperature water. It prevents milk stone. You do this first wash with not hot and not cold water. Just give the jar a good scrub. Jeez. Take off the blue top and get a good look at the filter to make sure there's nothing abnormal there, no blood, no chunks of bad stuff. It's always pristine clean with these girls, but it's still worth checking. Same thing with the other one. Good look at the filter. And a brief scrub with the sponge. And then I grab the soap bucket, and this again is lukewarm water. Just a small squirt of soap is all it takes. And I put the cap back on the jar. Carry it back to the milk machine. I hook up the milk lines just like before. The blue line clear tube goes to the blue cap, and the white tube, The opaque tube goes to the white cap. Turn on the suction, and I put the inflation in there and just swish it around real well. I'll take the brush, run it down there once or twice just to get it good and clean. I need a smaller brush because that one's just a little bit tight. Anyway, and then I push on the inflation to make the pulse style flow, which supposedly cleans better. And I keep doing that till just about the entire gallon is transferred. It's not the end of the world to suck up some of that foam into the suction tube because it's got an overflow, but I try not to do it. One thing I wanted to show about this inflation, and that is that it has a valve type assembly. So this is open and it's not pulling any suction. To pull suction, you have to lift up on the green circular deal, and that pulls suction. So it's a little different than the inflations that came with the simple pulse. So this is the same thing except that I use hot water, hot tap water. I use about a half a cap full of bleach. That's a pretty good strong sanitizing solution. And all that'll get rinsed out in the final rinse. And while that's filling, I put the cap back on the second jar. And this is a three-step procedure with a soap rinse, a bleach rinse, and an acid rinse, which is a Star San, the last one. Carry it back over to the milk machine. And transfer the suction tubes over to the second jar. I don't bother to drain the tubing or anything. I don't really think it matters if this gets milk mixed in. Swish the inflation around and clean the part of the tubing I can get to there. Turn on the suction. Push the green bottom button to give it a pulsatile wash. Take these back into the sink. I give it 10. So I'm going to pause the video while that just sits there. I'm going to go ahead and keep running this while May has her supper. I bring her in here so she doesn't have to fight for her food. Now that the boys are gone, she gets pretty free access to the mama's milk, but I'm taking most of that, so I want to make sure she gets enough calories. Hey, where are you going? That didn't last long. that stuff is sitting. Get the mason jars out for the next morning. Saves one more step. I label these with a dry erase marker with the month and the day and the either morning or evening. Of course, don't have to put the year because that milk is not going to last that long. And those jars go in the freezer. Okay, so I do try to drain most of the excess water out of the inflation before I hang it up. Hang it on the post up there. And then connect it to the drying circuit, which I will show in just a second. So that's one really nice feature of the Simple Pulse is it's got this drying circuit that will help dry the inflation and the tubing because it takes a long time to drip dry. When you turn on the pump, it blows warm air up the tubing through the inflation and out. Okay, so this stuff has bleach water in it. I try not to waste anything. I just pour it all out and give a final further rinse to the jar and cap. And then I use the Star San rinse to get the rest of the bleach out. So again, the Star San is a no-rinse sanitizer. It really, same thing as the phosphoric acid that they put in sodas as a preservative. You know, I don't want to drink a lot of it, but what's remaining in here with the foam and stuff is just minuscule amounts, and the rest of it dries off during the drying period. I don't worry too much about cleaning the drink cup excessively because I'm not going to drink strip cup, not the drink cup. Okay, and then there's the final step in the cleaning process. I do what probably is a little bit of overkill, which is I put the collection bars in an oven at 200 degrees for 10 minutes. And that also gives me a timer to know when to shut off the drying circuit. I don't like to run it all day. Okay, so looking at the clock, started a little bit before 5, and it's now a little bit after 5:30. So I'm going to say, give credit for the moving the camera around and all that. I can move a little bit faster when I'm not messing with that stuff. But probably 30 minutes soup to nuts, beginning to end, including cleaning and being done.